You know, we hear about historical golden ages all the time, right? These supposed peaks of human civilization. Well, today, we're going to tackle one of the big ones, the Gupta Empire in ancient India. But the question is, was it really as perfect as the history books make it out to be?
I mean, some historians have talked about it in almost utopian terms. There's this one account that says, and I quote, "Life was never happier than it was back then." That's a pretty powerful image, right? It paints this picture of a perfect, blissful society.
But was it really like that? This glowing reputation has been passed down for ages, but historians today are starting to dig a little deeper. So let's ask the real questions. Was this era truly golden? And maybe even more important, who was it golden for?
Okay, so let's dive in. To figure out if the label even fits, we first have to ask, where did this whole golden age idea come from in the first place? And believe me, the answer is probably not what you're thinking. So here's the kicker. The people living in the Gupta Empire never called it a golden age. Nope. That label is a modern invention. It was actually cooked up in the early 20th century, and not just to describe history, but to serve a very, very specific political agenda. Okay, so picture this. During British colonial rule, there was this propaganda push claiming India didn't really have a significant history of its own, just a long line of invasions. So what did Indian nationalist historians do? They fought back. They pointed to the Gupta era and said, see, we had this incredible golden age. It was a way to build national pride and create a powerful counter-narrative. And you know what? The idea was so powerful that it just stuck. But it also gave us a very simplified, almost fairy tale version of what really happened. But why the Guptas? I mean, what made them the poster child for this golden age? To be fair, the people who came up with the label had some pretty amazing evidence to back it up. So let's take a look at the case for gold. Let's see what gave this period such a sparkling reputation. You want a perfect example of their genius? Just look at the Iron Pillar of Delhi. You can still see it standing today. It's this massive pillar from the Gupta era, and get this, after 1,600 years out in the open, it's barely rusted. That's just a mind-blowing testament to how advanced their metalworking skills were. And it wasn't just metal. This was an age of incredible intellectual breakthroughs. We're talking about mathematicians like Gupta, who are among the very first to really formalize the rules for a concept that would change everything, the number zero. I mean, treating zero not just as nothing, but as an actual number, that was a total game changer for math and science forever. Then you have another genius from that time, Aryabhata. He was a mathematician and astronomer who calculated the value of pi to 3.1416. For the 5th century, that is an unbelievably accurate number. It just goes to show you how sophisticated their understanding of geometry really was. And it wasn't just about science and numbers either. All this wealth and stability, especially from the royals, it fueled a massive cultural explosion. This became the classical age for Sanskrit literature. We're talking timeless plays and epic poems from literary giants like Kalidasa, who's often called the Shakespeare of India. Just amazing stuff. So, on top of all those headline-grabbing achievements, the empire was just really well run. It had a solid administration, a booming economy with lots of trade, and they were minting these beautiful gold coins. All that prosperity funded incredible art, like finely crafted sculptures and, for the time, a pretty remarkable level of religious tolerance. So yeah, when you put it all together, you can totally see why people pointed to this era and said, that's it, that's the ideal. But that's the story you get if you're looking from the top down. That's the story of the rich, the powerful, the thinkers in the royal courts. The moment you shift your gaze away from the palaces and start looking at the lives of everyday people, well, a much, much darker picture starts to come into focus. And this really gets to the heart of it. The experience of living in the Gupta Golden Age depended entirely on who you were. If you were part of the upper crust, rich, powerful, high caste, then yeah, it was an amazing time of opportunity and culture. But for pretty much everyone else, for the vast majority of the population, it was a completely different story. For most people, this period actually saw the rise of some seriously oppressive systems that would cast a shadow for centuries. Feudalism started to take hold, basically forcing peasants into bondage. The caste system got way more rigid, which is when the whole concept of untouchability really emerged. And maybe most shockingly, the status of women took a nosedive. This is the era where horrifying practices like sati, where a widow was burned on her husband's funeral pyre, began. This quote from one historian really just says it all. Even while poets were writing about how ideal women were, the reality was that they were becoming, quote, an item of property. Their rights were stripped away, they couldn't own property, and were basically seen as living under the permanent control of the men in their lives.
So what are we left with? We have these two completely opposite stories of the exact same period. One is about incredible genius and achievement, and the other is about deep, grinding social oppression. How on earth do you reconcile those two things?
Well, it seems the Gupta Empire is a textbook example of what a golden age so often turns out to be. It's a period of amazing innovation and culture for the people at the top, but it's often built on a foundation of massive social inequality for everybody else. It was no utopia. It was a deeply divided society with a legacy that is, to say the least, complicated.
Let's go all the way back to that incredible iron pillar for a second. The inscription carved into it? It's not about the brilliant craftsman who figured out how to make it. Nope, it's a poem praising one guy, King Chandra. And that's the perfect reminder, isn't it? The history that survives, the monuments that last, they almost always tell the story of the winners, the people in power.
And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. The story of the Guptas kind of forces us to give any so-called golden age a second look. You know, whether we're talking about the Renaissance or the Victorian era or maybe even America's own Gilded Age, we always have to ask the most important question. Who's being left out of that shiny golden story?